is up? We are back with another Browns breakdown episode of Call on the Field Stands podcast. I'm Ryan Denchef. Jeff Mapis is sitting across from me without his nice headphones because he forgot them because he's a jackass. But we are here. The Browns get another win, improved to almost 500 like they've been basically all season. Can't get over that hump to get back to 500. More or less eliminated from the playoffs, but another nice win this past weekend that we'll get into. But more, we're going to get into what this rest of the season really means, what we can gauge out of it, and ultimately a conversation that's been had by many a Browns fan and, you know, just across the league in general is whether or not Freddie Kitchens is the long-term solution at head coach. Will he make it through next offseason, or will they fire him and bring somebody else in? All topics that we will jump into. But Jeffrey, welcome back to the Browns breakdown episode of the podcast. It's been a few weeks since I think we've busted one of these out.
Yeah, I think it has been a while.
So,
which is good. Need a break from the Browns from time to time.
You got to, especially what we've seen. It's kind of funny, like, what have they won? 4 out of their last 5 or something like that? Like,
yeah,
they're winning games and just can't really do anything that seems relevant. Like, they lose that Pittsburgh game. Basically, their season is basically over. But, you know, there's slight chance, and there's a lot, obviously, to get into other than whether or not they're going to make the playoffs, because that's pretty much easily defined as a hearty no, they are not going to.
Yeah,
but
they'd have to win out.
But,
and
yeah,
even
so,
then,
you know, outside of just breaking down the games, you know, we do want to get into some bigger topics, and, you know, there's not really much to talk about this past week. You know, the Browns did what they needed to do, beat the Bengals. Really wasn't. I mean, the game score-wise looked close, I guess, if you were on the outside looking in, but it was really never in danger. There's questionable moments of the game, some unfortunate events that occurred that, you know, interception that somehow was ruled an interception, which is the wildest thing we've ever seen. The one to Njoku, but just some things like that, turnovers and whatnot, that kept the Bengals in the game. The defense looked bad at times. Bengals were able to just move the ball downfield, but they didn't give up points. They stopped them in the red zone and ended up dominating the game. But, you know, outside of the games, because at this point, I think I looked it up today and ran through some scenarios and real quick to interject what I learned. So there's about 4% chance that the Browns will make the playoffs. And basically what needs to happen is the Titans need to lose every single game. The Browns need to win every single game. And the Steelers need to lose 2 of their next 3. And their schedule lines up to be Bills, then Jets, then Baltimore. And one would assume Baltimore might not even play a single one of their starters. Particularly Lamar Jackson's probably not going to play. And without Lamar Jackson, they're not going to probably win. So the Steelers can walk into the playoffs with a victory.
If the Steelers, how the fuck are they winning games?
I don't know,
It's
man.
Crazy.
Chuck the ball deep with Devlin Hodges, hope good things happen, and play solid defense. And that's pretty much what we've seen the last couple of weeks, and it's worked.
I mean, it works.
Worked against the Browns, worked this past week against the Cardinals.
Their defense is legit.
Yeah, oh yeah, that's what we've been saying, really. You know, and that's kind of the comments that we made. What the Browns needed to do was hold their own on defense, or hold their own on offense, don't turn the ball over, and then just match up evenly because they both have pretty decent defenses. That did not happen. The Browns turned it over, and what we saw what happened, the Browns lost.
And only gave Chubb the ball 6 times.
Yes.
And winning time.
Yeah.
Crunch time.
Like, their defense is good. They're good at taking the ball away. And, you know, their offense, at least with Hodges, has been good enough to get enough points to let their defense win them games. And, you know, that's what happened to the Browns game. They turned the ball over, and they weren't able to recover. And that's basically what their formula is. I could see them losing 2 of their next 3, but the Titans having to win 0 games and the Browns needing to win all of their games, which there's basically only one game that really matters for the Browns right now. It's the Ravens. They should handle their business against the Cardinals. Obviously, the Bengals to end the season should be another cakewalk. But, I think Titans have Houston twice and the Saints as their other game. So those are their 3 tough games, losable for sure. So, yes, there is a slight chance, but it's going to be unlikely as all hell for the Browns to
Houston
make
just got butt fucked by Denver.
Yeah, bro.
That was weird.
That was weird.
It was a bizarre weekend in the NFL, actually.
Yeah, man. I told you previous podcast how we do like the rankings. You rank your teams. Like, I think this team's going to win. I'm going to give them 16. If they win, you get 16 points. And then 15, 14. I had probably the worst week I've had all year, man. Every team that I picked just got fucked up pretty much.
Yeah. That's tough.
It was just one of those weekends where a lot of teams that you didn't expect to lose just lost.
Right. I know we're getting
I took some shots and
here,
it didn't work, but
the 49ers, god damn, they are for real, man. That game was insane.
Put up, 47 points against the Saints? Like, that's legitimate.
Jimmy had, I think, 4 touchdowns and maybe even 400 yards.
Yeah, they balled.
George Kittle, god damn, he is a beast.
Dude. He is. So, when we're talking about the Browns, their playoff hopes and dreams are pretty much fucked at this point. It would take more or less a miracle for them to make it in. Like I said, it's basically we need some things for the Steelers and the Titans to just start falling off the rails. I'm sure there's somebody else who's in that mix, but
Bills.
Well, the Bills pretty much more or less locked up the top spot. They already have 10 wins, so they're not getting caught by the Browns at least.
True.
So, basically you just need the Titans to lose all their games, the Steelers to lose 2 of 3, assuming they're going to win against the Jets means they need to lose to Baltimore the final week of the season. But if they win against the Bills, the Browns are doomed, more than likely. And, and then the Browns need to beat the Ravens. So it could be interesting if, the Bills beat the Steelers this week and the Browns handle their business against the Cardinals and then Houston beats the Titans. That would really make it more interesting the last 2 weeks of the season. But at this juncture, it's going to be difficult for the Browns to win, to make it to the playoffs. So with that being said, couple topics on the agenda here that we want to get into, obviously outside of just talking about the games. Number one is this season a failure? I kind of want to pose that question. So they're currently sitting at 6-7 with an outsider's chance of getting to above 500. One would assume they're not going to lose 2 of their next 3. So let's say they're at worst 8-8. But, big scale, big picture, all things being considered, as we sit right now on December 9th, is this season a failure in your eyes?
As we sit right now, it's a bit of a failure. Excuse me. I think the Browns are in a much better spot than what we've seen growing up. First year, I think, since we've been back that we have had victories over the other 3 division teams in the same year.
Yeah, well, it's the first time they beat the Steelers and the Ravens in the same season ever was this year. So
wow.
Yeah.
Then you throw in the trash Bengals.
Right.
3 wins there. Obviously, I think we both like Baker Mayfield long-term talent-wise. And some of our other young players. So I think the Browns are in a decent position, better than where we've been, certainly. But with how this team got hyped up this offseason, and with how, honestly, there was kind of like a cocky attitude among the players and in camp, and wanting, Freddie Kitchens preaching that we wanted to come out and be the most physical team out there, and we're not going to, take anybody's shit. And then you come out and lay an egg against the Titans and have, your 18 penalties, and it could have been more, like undisciplined shit, people getting personal foul penalties.
Yeah, that really set the tone for the season, to be honest.
Yeah, man. I don't know. That kind of stuff adds into it being a disappointment. And to go on a little rant here on why it's a huge disappointment for me is the Browns and Dorsey decided to bring in a guy like Odell Beckham. They bring in a guy like Kareem Hunt. Okay, 2 somewhat risks, if you will. Odell has this, strong personality. The media, he's polarizing. The media is always talking about him. It seemed like almost every year toward the end. In the Giants, there were rumors that he wanted out, blah, blah, blah. So you bring that guy in. You already have Baker. Bring Kareem Hunt in, who has also had some risk just with his past and getting suspended from the league. And, they don't really address something that is extremely important, the offensive line. And so they choose these they chose flash over substance. Then they rely on this rookie head coach to be able to organize all these personalities and big heads in the room. And it's kind of backfired on him. I don't think Freddie really knew how to handle it. I don't know why us as Browns fans trusted the Browns organization to be able to handle it. But I think Baker also has this attitude where he thinks he can get up and say whatever the hell he wants and go unchecked in the organization. And just like not directly calling out the medical staff, but bringing up the Odell injury and how it was mishandled. Like, dude, don't touch that with a 10-foot fucking pole.
Yeah.
Like, come on, man. You cannot go there. And I'll tell you what, you think the Browns told Odell to play? You don't think there was any involvement from Odell's side saying like, no, this is what I want to do. Like,
right.
Yeah, no, just Baker, you cannot fucking go there. That was a terrible look.
It was.
The other thing, shit like Freddie Kitchens wearing the t-shirt going in the Pittsburgh game, saying Pittsburgh started it, and then blowing a lead and getting embarrassed there to Duck Hodges. Like, I don't know, man. Some of that shit is just so embarrassing. Then you had the whole Myles Garrett thing, which I'm not saying is Freddie Kitchens' fault. It's Myles Garrett's choice and his fault. But like, these embarrassing moments just keep adding up for the Browns organization, and starts to get old. So those are some of the reasons why it's a disappointing year this year. Like, you can defend record to a point, but to still have all these fucking problems, like,
but
off
the final
field,
verdict, is it a failure though? I think is part of my question.
Yes,
disappointment. Of course, it's disappointment.
Yes, it's
we all
a failure.
wanted him to go. Okay.
Baker regressed. Your head coach has serious questions on if we want him back. We haven't utilized Odell. He's putting up his lowest career numbers in a single season. Like, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of reasons why it's a failure.
Yeah, I can't really argue. I mean, that's a valid opinion. When I look at just the overall what is what with the Browns, I think a lot of it is just unrealistic expectations. And big part of it is a lot of what you just said. They failed to address offensive line, and bringing in these other personalities, I don't really think impacted that much. Bringing in OBJ and Kareem isn't the reason why we're not winning games. I think a big part is the Vernon for Zeitler trade, which it ultimately ended up being all one big trade. But basically, that trade was agreed upon before the paperwork was actually finalized. And I think the gap between, and Vernon, he doesn't get a lot of credit, but he's played really well all season, to be honest. Hasn't put up the stats, and we talked about it in our regular episode about, guys who aren't stuff in the stat sheet doesn't really indicate what their impact is on the game. But the gap between Zeitler and Teller and Cush and whomever else they've had on that offensive line is huge. And it's been one of the biggest weaknesses of a Browns team we've seen in quite some time, which is kind of saying much. Like, the expectations that we had to win 9-10 games that a lot of people were saying preseason, I think has been largely derailed by the inefficiencies of the offensive line. They've been terrible. From my eyeballs, one of the worst offensive lines in the league. I don't know what the analytics and the stats will really state, but they're terrible. They've cost multiple games this season. We can all point towards Freddie Kitchens and his play calling, et cetera, but the pointing of the fingers should go directly on the offensive line. Yes, it's a team game, but an average offensive line, we would have a much different conversation right now.
Yeah, I think it would definitely have that sort of impact.
Yeah. And, you talk about all these other things, and in particular, new guys coming in. Apparently OBJ has been hurt all season, so maybe that's a little bit of an indication of why his numbers are down. But at the same time, you got everything that's going on. You got this rookie head coach. You're going to think everything's just going to come in and be, all roses and sunshine, and we're just going to walk into 10, 11 wins. That's just not really the nature of the NFL. A lot of different things need to come together for you to win enough games to get you in the playoffs. And, it's hard for me to say the season is a failure, in particular because we don't really even know what's going to happen. Like, they could end the season with 9 wins. If we go 9-7, miss the playoffs by a game because the Titans win 10 games, or we just lose that tiebreaker from week 1, like, is the season a failure because we won 9 games? Like, it's hard to really say that. There was games earlier in the season that we probably should have won, and you're going to look back like, if we would have got this done, we would have 10 wins, or we have 9 wins if we would have done this. Like, it's hard for me to say what the failure is until it happens. Like, if they come and go 8-8, lose to the Ravens and finish 8-8, like, I have to look at it at that point, I think, to really give myself a true bearing on if it's a failure. But at this moment, I don't really think it is. I just think the expectations were so high and in unrealistic fashion that is why everyone's talking about it being such a failure. Because honestly, like you even mentioned, this is probably the best Browns season we've seen maybe ever. I mean, obviously they went to the playoffs in 02 and won 10 games in 06 or whatever it was. But, in quite some time, in over a decade, the Browns have been terrible. And all of a sudden we're, win 4 out of 5, sitting at 6 and 7 with a chance to win 9 games and be above 500. And we're talking about how terrible the team is and it's a failure and fire the head coach and, get everybody out. And OBJ needs traded now because he's being complaining and all this stuff. Like, everybody needs to pump the brakes a little bit, I think, on what's going on in Cleveland. Really understand. And also you talk about like the comments that are made from Baker and about the medical staff and some other things that were said and all these different things. And Freddie wearing a t-shirt, like none of that, in my opinion, has any impact on winning games in the NFL and for this team. They're not losing because Baker's making comments in the media. They're not losing because Freddie Kitchens is wearing a fucking t-shirt. So you can say that's encompassing of the discipline and the atmosphere and the locker room presence of everything, and it's negatively impacting the team. I don't think it is in the fact that they're losing games because of any of this shit is happening. So for me, I don't really think it's a failure. It could, if they lose one of these next 2 games, between the Cardinals and the Bengals, if they lose one of those 2 games, then we're talking failure. We're talking fire Freddie Kitchens. The conversation that I'm having is definitely changed. We might even need to fire Freddie Kitchens. I don't know. And that's definitely a conversation that I want to get into next as the next topic. But, ultimately, that's how I see it. I don't see it as a failure. I think people need to pump the brakes on what this team was ever going to do. Things just don't click out overnight and work out the way that everybody thinks they can, just because on paper they have OBJ and Juice and Kareem and Chubb and Baker Mayfield, and Baker Mayfield set the touchdown record, and their defense, they got all these pass rushers, Myles Garrett, and they got a Pro Bowl second-year cornerback. Like, a lot of different things into play here other than all those things that just paper. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's kind of where I sit.
Yeah, I'm with you. And the other thing they're missing, a huge missing ingredient, if you want to talk about having a winning record, is we don't really have veterans on this team.
You got to learn how to win.
That came from
Freddie
winning
surely
teams.
Doesn't know how to win yet.
Yeah,
rookie head coach Baker doesn't know how to win yet.
Like, Randall came from the Packers, but was he really all? I mean, they viewed him as a bust. They wanted to get rid of him. They didn't value him.
Sean Kaiser for him. Like,
yeah. So we don't really have anyone that knows what a winning team looks like, knows what that type of locker room culture is. I mean,
that comes with time, I think, and. Next year is, I think, the big year when the expectations of winning 10 games is very warranted. And if they don't go to the playoffs, it is a huge failure in my eyes. But it's just hard for me to say it's a failure at this moment. And, I think that actually is a good segue. Talk about coaching staff. You can talk about learning how to win and understanding how to win. One of the big conversations is in the media today over the last couple of days is Mike McCarthy doing different things to prepare for his next push as a head coach in the NFL. And you talk about if they wanted to fire Freddie Kitchens, bringing in a guy who, has had winning experience. There's a couple guys. McCarthy is out there. Ron Rivera just got fired from the Panthers. He's another guy who will be in the conversation if Freddie gets fired. As guys who have been in the league for a while, understand what it takes to win, and have proven that they can win. But that kind of leads to the question, Freddie Kitchens, is he stay or does he go? Like I said, December 9th, after, 13 weeks of the season, 13 games, are we firing Freddie Kitchens? What says you?
I think it's unfair to make the call now when there are 3 games left.
Let's say they go 8-8.
8-8.
So that's a worst case scenario. Like, if they win only 7 games and win only one of their next 3, he needs to be fired.
He needs to be fired.
Let's say
you got to hit
worst
500.
case, best case. 8-8. Like, if he goes 9-7, I think it's going to be hard.
You can't
to
fire a
rationalize.
9-7
right.
coach.
You win. That would be what? 7 out of your last 8 games that you win.
You
start 2-6 and end 9-7. You're not firing Freddie Kitchens. Everybody needs to shut the fuck up. The fact that we've won 4 or 5 and gotten to 6-7 after starting 2-6, I think should be looked at as a great accomplishment. But fans are just. I don't know what it is, why we just can't realize where the team is and what we've accomplished to this point. But let's just assume 8-8 because that's a worst case, best case kind of situation where we can actually have a conversation about whether he should be fired or not.
Yeah. Man, if you go 500,
or you can see if the season ended today. We can even look at it that way.
Yeah, I mean, I still want to. I want to see more. I want to see how they finish. I think it's fair to do that.
Yeah.
Today, I would be more inclined to fire him than keep him.
Yeah.
If I had to answer today, but at the same time, my biggest, not biggest worry, but my one worry is, it seems like Freddie and Baker are buddy with each other, and if you move on from Freddie, what kind of reaction are you getting from your franchise quarterback? Now you can't allow this young, like,
right.
We're calling Baker a franchise quarterback because we're projecting him there. Like, he hasn't proven
Baker dictate
exactly
the head coach if it's not the right guy.
But at the same time, like, you drafted him, and you plan to invest your future with him. His opinion should be valued as well.
He's going to go a lot longer way of determining whether this team wins games than a head coach ever will. So
yeah,
I think.
And I mean, maybe if we bring in a new coach and he voices his displeasure and blah blah blah, all that, and makes a big deal out of it, maybe it shows who his true character is, and it was never going to work out. But that's one thought I have of moving on from Freddie. And good coaches don't grow on trees. You did mention 2 veteran coaches that just got let go. I would be fine with hiring McCarthy. I like Rivera too. He kind of makes me a little nervous, but he is a player's coach. Just don't know if he would be the right fit to come in and turn things around. Maybe he would. He's a really good leader.
Yeah, I think
that would set the culture that we still haven't created yet. I mentioned my frustration with all the off the field bullshit and the headlines, which some of it is created by the dumbass beat around here in the finer area of Cleveland. But Rivera might be good at that. It's tough to judge a rookie head coach in the NFL.
Exactly.
Like, he jumped from a fucking running backs coach. Like,
and people want to point to that, like, that should never happen. It's like, you got a learning curve. And that's another thing I want to point out. Like, you get a rookie quarterback, he comes in and struggles. Everybody's like, all right, give him a year, let him develop, let him understand the game and how to develop. And then the next season, you assume he's going to be better. He's going to be, more acclimated with everything. He's going to be better. Why can't we have that same conversation about a head coach who has already proven that he could turn things around a little bit? They've won, like I said, 4 of the last 5. Rookie head coaches have growing pains just like rookie quarterbacks do. So why are we just going to throw this guy under the bus just because people want to say, wow, he should have never got the promotion that he did. He spent all those years in Arizona and never got promoted. He fucking came from a running backs coach to head coach in 1 season. Like, there's more to it than all that stuff.
Yeah.
Like, you got to learn how to win just as a head coach, just the same as a first-year player. So I think they pumped the brakes on the whole fire Freddie thing personally. But if you're going to do it, they better have somebody already basically hired before they do it. Like, you can't just fire the dude and then go on a coaching search. Like, that is a terrible solution.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think Freddie's going to get fired. And I don't honestly think he should unless, everything gets derailed over the last couple of weeks. Like, it'll be interesting. Let's say they win the next game, whether even they win or lose against Baltimore. Let's say they're out of the playoffs and the last game doesn't matter. They're playing the Bengals. They lose that game. You have a serious conversation about what this team is about. And that would come down to the culture of what you're trying to build. If your head coach can't beat the Bengals just because the team's not in it as in the playoff push,
he needs to keep them in it.
A lot bigger conversations to be had.
We still have a lot to prove as a team and as a franchise. So they need to come out and win games and get to that at minimum 500 mark.
Right.
But it's such a loaded question. Like, things obviously have been a roller coaster this year. He's had to overcome a lot as a rookie head coach. But at the same time, I think some of it he put on himself.
Sure. I mean, that's definitely fair.
And I think it's also fair to, and I'm not calling for Dorsey's job, but to question or at least bring Dorsey into this as well. Like, the Browns in general have a huge offseason. There are still, I think sometimes people overvalue the true talent the Browns actually have. And yes, they are talented, but are they really there at important positions where they should be? Like, no,
not quite. They're close, and
they're close. They don't have the veterans either, which we already brought up. Like, that's a roster flaw.
Process. It's a big offseason upcoming for John Dorsey as well. Stay status quo, stick to the plan, I think is for the first time actually an opportunity. Might all get derailed over the next couple of weeks. They might just clean house and just start over again. But you've set up a plan of rebuilding this team, and it wasn't an overnight plan. Like, this was a multi-year plan. Now you got a new head coach, and you still have a lot of holes and deficiencies that we've seen, particularly offensive line, that has derailed a lot of games. Like, you have an opportunity to continue on the trajectory of building up the team for this next season. And that's really where, big strides can be made going into next season. And we're still talking about all these negatives, and they still, at worst, might finish 8-8. Like, that's a pretty good season for a young team that has a rookie head coach and, a first year or a second year quarterback, and a lot of first year guys who have been added to the team and all that kind of stuff. Like, it's not a terrible season. But we're talking about the Browns being 8-8. When's the last time we've been able to even sniff that?
Right.
And we're talking about, fucking fire the head coach after his first season of going 8-8. Like, could you imagine if we would have went 8-8 any other year and just fired our head coach? Like, we would be amazed that we won 8 games. Yeah. And all of a sudden, they just want to cut house because we thought we were going to win 11 games. Like, I think a lot of this fire Freddie shit is a little bit overblown by the fans and the media and everything like that, too. Like, hopefully, Freddie, or in my opinion, hopefully John Dorsey is not realistically considering firing Freddie Kitchens right now. Like I said, all things could change. They could get blown out by the Cardinals next week. And then I think we'll have real conversations about what's what. But it's kind of something to really evaluate at the end of the season. But I hope he's not, on Dorsey's mind of just cutting bait already. Like, you go 8-8 with a rookie head coach with the talent we have to build into next season. It would make no sense to me to just reset again with another first-year guy, whether it's McCarthy or Rivera, like, veteran guys, but still the first year in our organization. Still first year with Baker Mayfield. It's still first year with OBJ and all these other guys. Like, don't need to hit the panic button just because we lost a couple games we should have won with a rookie head coach and a young team and a terrible offensive line.
Yeah. So. No, I mean, it was definitely a gamble hiring Kitchens, but they hired him for a reason. They obviously liked him. I'm sure they talked to the players.
We're gonna hire you. We really like you. We think you're the future of this organization, a head coach. We like what you got going on. Oh, but if you go 8-8, you're gone. Like, come on. There's no way that conversation was ever had. No. So what are we talking about now?
8-8 puts you, like I said, the team right now is already in a much better spot than what the Browns typically have been in. That's why it's kind of a difficult question now. You can point to positives and certainly negatives about this year in general that aren't all on Freddie.
Sure.
But I want to see the whole body of work.
Right.
There's 3 games left, and if he can get them to finish strong and go 2-1 in that stretch.
Yeah, I think that goes a long way for sure.
I think it goes. You can't fire a winning head coach.
You can't.
Even if so, that'd be winning out. But if they go 2-1 and finish really the last 10 games pretty damn strong of the season after a slow start,
2-6 start, and you finish maybe 8-8.
8-8. I mean,
6-2 your final half of the season. Like, it's unfortunate they lost a couple games earlier that they shouldn't have. But
yeah,
if they ended up,
and they'd have a winning record in the division for the first time in.
Right, exactly. Like,
since, yes, how long?
Yes, I think just closing statements. Like, yes, there's a lot that is negative and not great with what's going on with the Cleveland Browns. Like, there's things that aren't great.
I hope some of the off-field shit we're hearing is a farce.
The OBJ trying to get traded. And like you even mentioned it earlier, like, we heard that every year with OBJ in the Giants. Like, he wants out for like 3-4 years, and all he did is continue to go out and ball the fuck out. So just because you hear these things, and he's not even coming out and trashing anybody, and he was talking a hell of a lot more in New York before he got traded.
No, he's really been quiet here.
Like, I will see it when I'll believe it when he comes out and says, yeah, I want to get got.
Right.
But, basically my point is, you hear all this, all these negative things coming out of Cleveland, and just the different narratives and, all these comments and, the media blowing guys up left and right and saying OBJ doesn't want to be here and Baker Mayfield is doing this and Freddie Kitchens fucking up the team because he's wearing a t-shirt. Like, all that being said, there's a lot of positives that have been had this season too. There's a lot of building opportunities and a lot of growth that we've had and a lot of growth that could continue and hopefully will into next season to really set up a long-term successful franchise, not just one flash in the pan season. So with all that being said, people, I think, need to take a step back a little bit, look at it from that 30,000 feet view, that cliche people say, and really try to understand what's going on big picture in Cleveland, and not just look at the Cleveland.com headlines that talk about, OBJ this and Baker Mayfield that. So that's kind of what I want to see fans do. Just pump the brakes a little bit, realize what's going on big picture for this team, and have realistic expectations heading into the offseason, which they should be just as high, if not more so, than the expectations we had this past season. And I think they were just a little bit too much going into the season for fans.
10-6 was a little...
Especially with the schedule that the Browns had, especially with the schedule they had at the beginning of the season. Another thing that I've mentioned a lot of times, like young team, first-year head coach, to have the gauntlet in the first half of the season
it sucked.
Is so much different than if you had that in the back end of the season after you had time to kind of mesh and gel and get your shit together.
Right.
They're doing it now. They're trying to make a push. I think they're going to come up short, but I don't think there's a lot of, negatives that carry weight enough to make changes for the team. So, other than bring in more offensive line, because our offensive line is terrible. So
yeah, no, they still have roster problems that need addressed. Offensive tackle being numero
one on the list.
I mean, it has got to get fixed, and you'll still have money to work with. Maybe you go to free agency and combine that with the draft for offensive line. But I'm with you. I see both sides of the argument. You don't see starting quarterbacks, though, around Baker's age strive when they have to work for like multiple coaches year after year. Like, that's not good for anyone.
No.
So really what we should be rooting for is the Browns to finish strong, go 2-1, and, look pretty decent doing it. And, this off the field crap with Odell and all that nonsense kind of just fizzles out and was just rumor based anyway from the get-go. And the players come out and endorse that they like Freddie. Dorsey comes out and endorses him, and then they have a strong offseason in the draft.
Right.
That's obviously ideal scenario.
Sure.
But then if all that plays out and they flop again next year,
then we're having different conversations.
Go 500 again, for example, like, even then, I don't know who you're going to get, but it's like, at some point, enough is enough.
Yeah,
but
I don't even want to project that down the road. Like, what would be like if we see the same next year from Baker Mayfield that we've seen this year. I think we got bigger problems that we really want to get into right now and discuss. Yes. That's hopefully a conversation we'll never have to have, but it is on the minds. But I think ultimately, pump the brakes, let shit play out, and set up for next season with some momentum that you can build off of and grow with no longer a first-time head coach in your organization and some guys who have been around for a little bit. So that's kind of what we need to happen over the next couple weeks. Pump the brakes out there, people. Come on. Settle down. That's all I got to say.
Agree.
So
just hope we don't have to come back on here and get pissed off.
Yep. So with that being said, we will see you all next week, hopefully with a 500 Cleveland Browns team that I don't think we've seen a single time all season. Maybe we were 2-2 to start the year. I can't even remember if we were. I don't remember, but I know we weren't 3-3 or 4-4 or anything like that.
So I think we went to 1-3.
Yeah, might be to 500 for the first time.
Yeah.
In many, many, many years. So, which is kind of weird. Maybe there was a 1-1. I guess we probably started 1-1 this season, but I can't remember. Fuck it. Anyways, you know what I'm saying. Hopefully, we're back with a win and can kind of have some more detailed conversation about what's to come and what we've seen up to this season. Big week this week, going on the road to Arizona. Young team down there that's lost 6 straight, so they should not fucking lose. Anyways, it's been fun. Glad we're back and talking Browns. So we will see you all next week. Peace out.